So, guys, I want to talk about Granddad Bitches Freeman from the Boondocks. And I do think another interesting question that a lot of people do have is whether or not you would consider Granddad a good parental figure. And I do think that, in short, the answer is no. Like, obviously, there is a difference between a person who is a caring individual and sometimes has emotional maturity with a personality and a record of not being that mature of a person. Yeah, we can have parents that care about us, but it does not mean that they're good people or they're good parent figures as well. So, like there are definitely things that I want to highlight. Like obviously in the first episode you find out that Granddad spent their inheritance on the home in Woodcrest. So, and I really think that if you break it down really easily, that it's almost like he felt kind of entitled to spend their savings or their inheritance on the house. So it is also very very selfish because it's not because even though Huey and Riley will get that after he passes away, sometimes if you're going to get inheritance from somebody for a kid, it should be there to take care of the kid. It shouldn't be to buy something lavish. It's kind of just like what happens with a lot of child support, where people talk about how that goes to buying like the money that's going to not really the kid. It's really going to the house, clothes for the person, get clothes for the parent and whatever, really. So it's more to be kind of selfish. So, and that's also very true at Granddad's nature. He's mostly a selfish person. So that's the first thing, that he spends their inheritance more on a house more so for him to feel better about himself. And that's a strike against him. The next thing is that he does use physical abuse on Riley and Huey. And this is kind of a mixed thing because I do understand that, obviously he did come from an older generation. Like, if you really want to break it down, he had to be born either in the 1910s or the late 1920s, because he was a pilot during World War II. And back during that time, people did believe in corporal punishment. People did believe in spanking or hitting kids with belts. And that old expression, spare the rod, spoil the child, beat the devil out of the child. So there's definitely a sense of him just growing up with what worked. And I also think that the other thing too is that sometimes they do say that, with being a parent, that yelling at a kid, spanking at a kid, and hitting a kid is never appropriate unless a kid is such a danger that that's the only way to suppress their behavior. Like, honestly, with Granddad whipping Riley with a belt for hanging out with Lemilton Tayshawn, people could say that that's a good form of parenting because what was going to happen to Riley? He was going to end up dead, either shot by police or either reckless endangerment, or a situation where he and Huey had to be removed from Granddad, or Granddad going to jail for child neglect if that continued, where he hung out with Lemilton again and they accidentally killed somebody, or they went on a road rampage. So in that case, using a belt on him was correct. I do think that in the episode the itis episode, where what happens is Riley calls Mrs. Dubois Pete's cobbler, like, says it looks like throw up, and he hits him with a belt. Or when Martin Luther King visits, and he's like, that nigga just got free meal, and Granddad beats him with a belt. That's an example of abuse, because a kid being mouthy and disrespectful to other relatives, to being disrespectful to house guests, that doesn't deserve being hit with a belt. That's just a conversation with the kid about respect and boundaries. And if they don't do that, then you send them to their room. You have to kind of start small, then get bigger. But the other thing that I would kind of say is that I think sometimes what happens with Granddad, and this is also a big issue when people rely on spanking or hitting a kid, is that you need to have conversations with children afterwards about why you did that. Like, okay, well, Riley, the reason why I beat your ass after you hung out with Lemilton is because this kid is dangerous, and you knew better, and you knew better, and ultimately, you would rather take this ass whooping than being shot by police officers because you know how they profile black men, like your black kids and black men. But also the other thing is that you know better than getting into a car with this kid. And if this kid's doing something like pressuring you or whatever, I need to know about it and set some boundaries because I'm not going to see you get into some form of entrapment. That's what he should have done. Um, the next thing that I would say about Granddad, like, obviously the belt thing's an issue, but whenever it was a situation where Huey and Riley were behaving very badly and doing dangerous behavior, I can say that physical discipline was appropriate. But other times with like Riley mouthing to him, that's not appropriate. I think the other example I would say is Huey when he made that like bomb wave cream. Like obviously hitting Huey with a belt may have been appropriate because obviously Huey was making a bomb and that's above and beyond. But but when Riley was doing graffiti on different people's houses, that's an example where there's kind of like a middle ground. Like there, on one sense, it's like he has to pay tens of thousands of dollars to get all the damages fixed. But one can understand that Riley doesn't have the concept of how much money that really is and whatever. The next thing that I would say is that I want to stop a little bit about bad things. I want to talk about some good things, like him paying for Riley to see an art tutor. That's good parenting. Say like, okay, we're going to use your art talent in a way that's constructive, and then making Riley remove the graffiti off their house. That's a good form of discipline to say, you know what, and I like what he said. It's still vandalism, even though you're trying to make a point. Also, that episode where Riley thinks that he's gay and Granddad learns to love Riley and accept him, I think that's kind of their strongest moment because it shows that Granddad learns that even though he's an old man, he still loves his grandson. He's not gonna. But there's many people that would just like say, you know what, I don't want you, get out of my life and whatever. And then also with telling Huey to pray for his friend, right after he kind of like yells at Huey and says something mean because I think he understands, he's short tempered, but he also can realize that there's some things that he does. Well, and obviously like with, when, Stink Meter comes, through Tom's possession and all that, I do think that, with him fighting along his grandkids, it is kind of like that idea of, what, they know how to fight in a pack or whatever. So there is a sense of camaraderie. So that those are good things about his character. I do think that the other things that he puts his kid in a lot of danger, like obviously with Cristal, even though he was naive, he allowed a pimp named Slickback into his house. He allowed a pimp named Slickback to come to his house many, many times. He also allowed Cristal to stay, even though he didn't know like she was a prostitute. Like obviously, again, if I was getting a divorce and custody of the kid, and I didn't know that the girl that's my girlfriend's a prostitute, and other people say, oh, well, you're actually dating a prostitute, what's going to happen to the kid? They're going to go to the wife. They're going to go to the other person. They're not going to stay with me because they're like, oh, well, you dated this girl. Even though you didn't know she's a prostitute. Oh, well, kids live in the house with a prostitute. And you're giving the kid chores such as throwing her clothes in the laundry, prostitute laundry. We know that there's probably semen cum, anal cream pie, like leftover fluids and other things like that. So, and maybe some venereal disease stuff. So it's, so that's also true that, he doesn't, consider their safe. He doesn't consider their safety, whether he's naive or not. And then the other thing too is that with the Kung Fu Killer Wolf bitch and his pattern of dating women that are crazy and dangerous, obviously I think he would get into a pattern. Obviously a person would say that, well, he's a very poor judge of character, but I think that, he has to do a little bit more on working on himself so he doesn't bring somebody into the house that's kind of dangerous. Maybe go on a few dates before you bring somebody over. But I think anybody can kind of agree that that's also child endangerment, that, he has a Colombian drug lord, then he actually has a girl that wants to steal his kidneys, and then he actually has Luna and a few other like crazy people. So I do think that, the way he approaches women and bring women home is not okay. The other thing that I would say when you look at Granddad's character is just, like, as I said, like, I think one of the big issues is like Ed and Rummy, like how he is okay with Riley hanging out with them, and more than likely he does that because he wants to make Ed Wunsler Sr. happy. So really, like, Ed Wunsler, the third, gave Riley a shotgun to shoot him in the chest with, bulletproof chest with, and they commit crimes. They almost kidnap Oprah. They did other crimes as well. He knows that they were doing burglary and other things, so he's still okay with his grandson hanging out with criminals and people that allow him to use firearms and other things like that. So it does show like his and it's not an ableism. It's just like, complacency to allow his kids hang out with dangerous people. The next thing that I would say is that you look at the episode, The Fundraiser. He was more concerned about Riley spoiling him, like as he said, a better world for me, a better world for me. So he cares more about, like, Riley spoiling him than actually understanding that Riley got into a shootout. Riley was in an environment where there was a shootout between federal agents and mobsters, and Riley would have been killed off, but it was like the bulletproof vest that saved him. So, it's that as well. And I also think that, even like the episode of Breaking Granddad, he wants Huey to help him make bomb wave cream and other dangerous chemicals just to make money and whatever. And he's willing to kind of like, mess around with the chemistry set and try to figure it out and blow. And he's like, you know what? You either show me how to do it the right way, or I'm gonna like continue until I blow up, until we all blow up or whatever. So, it goes down to his character of being selfish. So I do think, in short, that, like, while Granddad has some redeeming qualities, like he can be caring. Obviously, he is a stereotype of a naive, out of touch, and emotionally immature human being, and an old man, really. And also, we can feel for him because he is at the latter part of his life. There's definitely he's not a good parental figure, even though Huey and Riley are so over the top that, obviously sometimes corporal discipline may be appropriate. And while he may be caring and loving and care about them, there is a sense of him and they love each other. Definitely, he is somebody that I think that has to kind of step back and reapproach and be somebody that teaches lessons to his grandkids so they grow up the right way. I do think that he's just not a good parent figure that teaches, and that kind of causes all those problems, really. But also, part of his character is that he's very, very selfish. He's emotionally immature, and he's also selfish because he's about to die, and that really impacts his psychology. So that should be a topic for another video.